Good evening and welcome to the Journey Home. My name is John Mark Grodi. I am the Communications Coordinator for the Coming Home Network International, and I'm standing in for my father, Marcus Grodi, as he's been called away on a family health situation, but he promises he'll be back next week. But we didn't want to miss this opportunity to interview a very special guest this evening. Her name is Abby Johnson. She's a former Baptist and Episcopalian, and many of you may be familiar with her through her book Unplanned, which is available on EWTN's religious catalog at EWTN.com. As well as her powerful work in the pro-life movement. As Marcus says every week, we have this wonderful privilege given to us by EWTN to bring into your home stories of men and women who, through their devotion to truth, their devotion to Christ, made a very unexpected decision. The decision to come home to the Catholic Church. And that's the case with Abby Johnson. So welcome, Abby Johnson, to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being with us and sharing your story, Abby. Well, as Marcus says every week, the main job of the host is just to get out of the way. And so maybe talk a little bit to begin with about your early spiritual journey. What was life like as a child? What was your knowledge of the faith and your background there?
Sure. Well, I grew up Baptist and was raised in a Christian home, a very conservative, amazing home. My parents have been married for almost 40 years, and just a great upbringing with my parents and strong in their faith. My dad's a deacon in the Baptist church, and we're their members. And then I went to college, and was very active in high school, my youth group and youth choir and all of that. And then went to college at Texas A&M in College Station, and was still going to church, still involved there at a local church. Got involved with Planned Parenthood as a volunteer.
Before we get that, real quickly, what was your faith life like? And personally, did you have a relationship with God at this point?
Yeah, I was baptized when I was 8, and actually baptized with my father when I was 8. And was a believer in Christ and was a follower of Christ. I was a good kid growing up, never missed curfew, never didn't do things that I really wasn't supposed to do. And when I started volunteering with Planned Parenthood, I didn't tell my parents for a year and a half while I was there. And I think that was because I knew that based on how I was brought up and what their beliefs were. They were pro-life. I was raised pro-life. I knew that they were not going to be okay with me working in the abortion industry. So I was trying to gather up enough good stories so to try to convince them that I was doing the right thing and I was working in the right movement.
Right. Now, so you had a sense of what their views were. Is that true for the rest of the Baptists you knew? Was that kind of the sense in the church? What was... Was it maybe mixed?
I can honestly say that I sat through a lot of sermons and I never heard, even in college, I never heard a pastor talk about abortion, calling abortion a sin, but also calling for healing and the forgiveness. I never heard that from the pulpit. And I do remember whenever I was at what led me out of the Baptist church was I found out that the church that I was a part of in College Station, they were actually going to be hosting a 40 Days for Life event at their church, and I was very put off by that. Yeah. But I would say that the majority of Baptists would consider themselves pro-life. Right. Are most of them activists in the movement? Probably not. The majority that I know are not. But many pregnancy centers are run by people of Protestant faith and Protestant background, and so it's been great to really have a good, cooperation and to be able to work with them, and collaborate with them.
So, what initially piqued your interest about getting involved with Planned Parenthood?
I didn't know much about them, honestly, and so when they told me that they were there, kind of as this benefactor to the masses, they told me they were there to provide health care, women's reproductive health care for women, to provide annual exams and all these things that women needed. And that women would have nowhere else to go without Planned Parenthood. I didn't know that wasn't true.
Right.
And she was selling me all of the talking points, and I bought every single one of them because I was just very uneducated and very ignorant of what Planned Parenthood was really about, and even about the pro-life movement. I mean, I grew up pro-life, but we didn't sit around the dinner table and talk about the pro-life movement or issues or anything like that. Right. So I was initially drawn to them just because it seemed like they really had a sincere concern for women and wanted to help women when they were in crisis, and also just for regular health care.
Right. And you probably were meeting others like yourself who had the same sense that they want to help women, we want to be there, and if this is the group that's going to do that, then...
Absolutely, yeah. And so I got started with them, ended up graduating from college, went on to get my graduate degree, and stayed on with Planned Parenthood, was actually an employee, stayed on with them, and really enjoyed what I did, enjoyed my job, and really liked what I was doing. And I tell people, once I was in Planned Parenthood, once I was there, that's when Satan was able to really began blinding me to the truth and what was right in front of my face. It took 8 years for me to finally get to the point where I said, I can't do this anymore. Right. But it was a gradual. It's not like I went, from being this Christian pro-life person to all of a sudden running an abortion clinic. It was a slow process. Just kind of bit by bit, because that's the way that sin works. Yeah. And eventually, I was running the clinic. I was working back in the lab, piecing babies back together. I was doing things that I could have never imagined myself doing. Yeah, there
is that amazing quality to sin that we become numb to it. It starts with little things, maybe well-intentioned wrong steps, and then those compound over time. Right. So okay, so. And all throughout this process, what was your faith life all through that? Were you still somewhat involved?
So when I got ticked off at the Baptist church I left, how dare they be pro-life? Yeah. When I left the Baptist church, I started looking for a church that would accept where I worked and my values at the time. And I found a home in the Episcopalian church. So the Episcopal church is, their national doctrine is very pro-choice. Their bishops are pro-choice. They advocate for abortion. The priests in our Episcopal church would actually send girls to me at the clinic so that I could talk them into having abortions. So most of the people, it was funny because the first time I went there and I started meeting people, I recognized their names because they were all donors to Planned Parenthood. Wow. And so I really fit in there, and it was great for me because I could say, look, I'm still a Christian. Right. I'm still going to church. It's no big deal. You can be for abortion and be a Christian. Look at me. I'm sitting in church every Sunday, but I was very removed from God. So I was going there and I was playing the part, and we were doing blessing of the animals, and we were doing these things, but there was really no deep connection with Christ, because there couldn't be, as long as I was still working in the industry. Right.
Well, and that's of course. That aspect of it, that involvement with religion, is the experience of many out there. People, it's easy to make religion the goal, for some people. It can become your club. And I have the club that I enjoy. It fits my values, and so I continue to attend. And all the while, we become more and more numb to the contradictions there. Right. So, okay, so how did that continue? What, or at this point, is this when you started to have an awakening?
Yeah, so I was, I was enjoying what I was doing. I had a couple of things happen inside of Planned Parenthood that caused me to maybe question what we were doing, or, what's the real goal here. We had quotas for abortion, and we had an abortion quota that we had to fulfill every month, or people would start getting laid off. And that was I guess, distressing to me, because I really believed at Planned Parenthood that we were trying to reduce the number of abortions. Right. So when my quota from one year to the next doubled, that was very troubling for me.
That is just a crazy thought, a quota.
Yeah, and but it's their business model, and that's it's inside of every Planned Parenthood clinic and every abortion clinic across the country. So that was troublesome. But after 8 years of justifying what I was doing there and justifying my sin, I had become pretty proficient at justification. So I'm not really sure how I did it, but somehow I went home and rationalized that meeting that I had. And about a month later, I was actually called into an exam room, into a procedure room to assist with an ultrasound-guided abortion procedure. And it was then that I saw a 13-week-old baby in the womb fighting and struggling for his life during the abortion procedure. And that was really shocking for me because I believed wholeheartedly that the unborn did not feel pain until 28 weeks.
Right.
That's what I had been told by Planned Parenthood. That's what I had then in turn told all of these women that asked me if their baby was going to feel pain. That was a very common question that I got.
Right.
And so I was shocked to witness this. And, I walked out of the room that day feeling very numb, feeling very betrayed by this organization that I had believed in, knowing that they had lied to me, but really felt like I had betrayed women because I had not given them the truth. And it took me about a week, but I remember sitting in my office, and we were in the middle of a 40 Days for Life campaign, which I hated. And I'm looking out the window, and there's these two women praying outside the clinic, and I recognized them. They were there every Monday. And I guess for the first time in a long time, I was really praying and really trying to connect with God. And I was just saying, God, I need someone to talk to. I need to go. So my parents were on vacation. I didn't want to bother them with that. My husband was always pro-life, but, I just didn't talk too much about my work with him because it bothered him. And so I thought, who am I going to go to? And I felt like God was telling me, go to them. They've always said they would help you. Go to them. And I thought, no, give me somebody else because that's not who I want to go to. Right. But eventually I did. And after a few minutes, I got in my car and I drove literally 50 yards. Their little office was next door to our clinic. Oh, wow. And I drove over there and walked in and just said, I've been wrong and I need to leave and I need your help. And that was really when my journey home began.
Now, on that note, something I just wanted to double back and explore just a little bit further because it as we fight this battle, as we deal with these issues, these pro-life issues in our culture, I think there is a question of how can we really get to that point where we don't see what is so shocking. I'm just wondering if we can talk a little bit more about, I guess at that aspect, at that point, as this is becoming apparent, maybe reflect just a little bit more on how does someone get to that? How does that numbing effect work, especially in regards to these pro-life issues? I'm just thinking in terms of, so all throughout your experience with Planned Parenthood, the specifically pro-life questions of the life of the unborn, the pain. I guess that's just a crazy phenomenon that I would imagine that a lot of viewers don't understand. So as you're talking to these people, as you're going through this part of your experience, maybe talk about kind of the internal change that's going on a bit more.
Yeah, I would have pro-lifers ask me, at the fence when I would talk to them, they would ask me, Abby, when do you think life begins? And I would say, I don't know and I don't care. I can tell you I have a 7-year-old daughter and I've only been out 4 years. So I was pregnant with her, had a baby while I was working at Planned Parenthood. And when I was pregnant with her, it was a life. She was a baby. But, maybe that was because she was wanted. Maybe if it was unwanted, it was just tissue or feed. There's just there's some some flaws there in logic and reason, but you don't see it. You know, I mean, we had they threw me a big baby shower whenever I had my daughter, you know, but then it's not a baby when someone's having an abortion. And so it's, it is, I mean, it really is a phenomenon. Actually. I mean, it's I remember reading the first book that I read whenever I left Planned Parenthood was Bernard Nathanson's Hand of God. And he talked about in this book this kind of double effect, this double life that the Nazi soldiers lived. And so they would go into the concentration camps and they would kill Jews, they would gas them, they would torture them, they would kill babies, and then they would go home to their families and they would sit around the dinner table and they would pray and they would eat dinner like nothing happened.
Right.
And that was exactly how my life was. I was going to work every day. I was piecing parts of babies back together. I was helping to assist, you know, women when they were going in to have abortions. I was coercing them. I was selling abortion to them. And then at night I would go home and I would rock my newborn baby. And so it is this kind of inconsistency, but that was my life. Right. That was my life for 8 years. And I think we see it in many different places throughout. I mean, you know, we hear about, clergy who are married, who have affairs. They're leading this double life. And that's what sin does to us. It creates in us a different person.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened to me. I wasn't a bad person.
Right.
I was still very charitable. I did it because I believed I was helping women. I had been duped into believing that I was doing the very best thing for women. And I myself have had 2 abortions. So I was really trying to justify my own abortions by helping to sell abortions to these other women.
Was that during your time with Planned Parenthood?
So I had my first abortion about a year before I went to work, went to volunteer with Planned Parenthood, and then I had my second abortion after I had been there for a year. Okay.
Yeah, you made a really great point, which is just that we do have to keep in mind that again, that we are also victims of our sin.
Yes.
You know, our sin can affect other people, but it does create this double life, this other person, you know, and we continue, even when we're blind to it, we continue to experience the effects of this sin. And as you said, you felt betrayed.
Yes.
And then you mentioned that you were married at this point?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yes. Yeah. I've been married for almost 9 years, and we got married while I was volunteering at Planned Parenthood, and my husband was always pro-life and was also raised pro-life, and so it created some tension in our marriage. But I remember hearing my husband Doug, he was doing an interview with someone after I left, and I remember hearing him say, I always knew that one day she would leave because she had this really deep concern for the women coming into the clinic, and she did it because she loved these women, she cared about these women. I just knew that eventually, with time and a lot of prayer, that she would see that she couldn't separate the woman from the child, and that she would have to care about them as a whole, you know, as a unit. And that's exactly what happened. Right.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, my name is John Mark Grodi, and I work with the Coming Home Network International, and I'm standing in for Marcus this evening as he's been called away on a family health situation, but he'll be back next week. And we're talking with Abby Johnson, and as Abby's been talking, she got to this crucial, pivotal moment in her work with Planned Parenthood where it all changed. And so let's talk a bit more about then what started happening after this change occurred.
So the day after I went to the Coalition for Life, the pro-life group in town, I decided I could not work at Planned Parenthood anymore. I didn't have a job. I didn't know what I was going to do. My husband was a teacher, so we used to joke and say he just worked for our insurance. You know, he didn't make any money. And so I thought, you know, what are we going to do? But I just knew that I had to take that step of faith. And the only reason I feel like I could do that was because I had this faith foundation, right, that I was raised with. And so I was raised to trust God. And a lot of the workers, they don't have that same foundation. So it was a little easier for me to take that first step.
Right.
So I left, and really the Coalition for Life started helping me, trying to find a job, but we were keeping everything very quiet. And about 3 weeks after I left, a fax came, and said that Planned Parenthood was going to sue me.
Wow.
Apparently they think it's illegal to become pro-life. And so we ended up going to court, and it was a day that there were some parts that were very comical, but it was a very heartbreaking day for me, because I watched my friends take the stand and testify against me, and then once again I felt betrayed.
Right.
But knew I was doing the right thing. Knew that I was, yes, I was feeling these terrible feelings, but I was doing it for the right reasons. And so I just kept pushing forward. The lawsuit was dismissed, of course. Right. And it's funny actually, because we were looking for a new church home.
Yeah.
The priest and the vestry of the Episcopalian church that we were in came to us and said that we were no longer welcome.
Really?
In their church. Now that I was publicly pro-life, I was no longer welcome there, and we didn't want to be somewhere we weren't welcome. Yeah. And certainly they had different ideals than we did now, and so we started looking for churches, and my husband was adamant that it was not going to be the Catholic Church. We were not going to become Catholic, so I just needed to forget it.
What was the reason for that?
I think I know that we both had a lot of myths that we had internalized about the Catholic Church, and he had an issue with the Pope, and I had an issue with priests being celibate, and we just had all these different, worshiping Mary and all this kind of
Did
stuff. Did
those kind of come from home life or from just your...
I think a lot of them actually came from working inside Planned Parenthood.
Really?
Because, of course, Planned Parenthood hates the Catholic Church. And so I heard a lot of that, but I think just kind of a misunderstanding also from not only my parents. My parents never really talked about the Catholic Church, but I think just the church in general. Hearing things maybe from pastors about the Catholic Church and
Sure.
Why we're different than the Catholic Church and how they're wrong and we're right. And so, just kind of growing up, I heard some of those things. But my mom, it's funny, my mom says that I must have been born Catholic, because when I was a kid, I grew up in South Louisiana, and predominantly in South Louisiana, it's Catholic.
Right.
But we weren't. We were Protestant, and we went to a small church there. With the other 10 families that were Protestant. And no, it was more than that. But I remember when I was young, like 5 or 6, I would turn on EWTN and I would watch Mother Angelica. Oh. And so here's this little 5-year-old Baptist kid watching Mother Angelica on EWTN, and all these kids would say, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a teacher. I'd say, I want to be like Mother Angelica. And I would put a towel over my head and pretend to be a nun around my house.
That's awesome.
And then actually when I worked inside of Planned Parenthood, my house was completely decorated almost entirely in Marian art. I was fascinated with Catholic art and fascinated really with Catholicism. Yeah. And then also while I worked in Planned Parenthood, one of the only things I took out of my office was this big bowl, and it was full of miraculous medals. People that would go and pray outside of our clinic, they would lay miraculous medals on the fence line in the flower bed, and every week I would go out there and I would pick them all up. I would collect them all, and I would put them in this big bowl in my office. And so that was one of the only things that I took, besides all my personal stuff, was this bowl of miraculous medals.
For those in the audience who don't know, maybe would explain what an miraculous medal is and its significance to a Catholic, actually.
Well, there's different. Most of the ones that were out there were Marian medals, and there were sometimes other St. Christopher, whatever out there. But I know that these people were praying over these medals and putting them there on our soil, so to speak. And so it was.
Yeah, that's a very Catholic thing, because we do understand that God does work through material. He as he came and became incarnate, and he died on the cross. He does work through sacramentals, through sacraments, to bring about His grace. And so that that may have been an additional seed planted, through some of the grace and the prayers there. This might be a good time to take a little break, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more how you moved to discover Catholicism, something that you and your husband never thought that you'd be looking into. As I mentioned earlier, my name is John Mark Grodi, and I am the communications coordinator for the Coming Home Network, standing in for Marcus because he's away with a family health situation, but he'll be back next week, and we're speaking with Abby Johnson here in EWTN. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to The Journey Home. My name is John Mark Grodi. I'm the communications coordinator for the Coming Home Network. And I'm standing in for my father Marcus this evening as he's been called away on a family health situation, but will be back next week. We're speaking with Abby Johnson, a former Baptist and Episcopalian, and she just told us this powerful part of her story where after working with Planned Parenthood for a number of years, she was awakened to the reality of the life of the unborn, and her life is taking just an unexpected turn. So before we pick that back up, I just wanted to, again, point out that Abby's book is available on EWTN.com on the religious catalog. It's called Unplanned. And tell us real quickly what this is about.
So it starts out talking about the ultrasound that caused me to leave Planned Parenthood. And
Right.
The first chapter's tough to get through, but I tell people, I promise, if you can get through the first chapter, then you can get through the rest of the book.
Sure.
It's a lot easier after the first chapter. And it basically just talks about how I got started with Planned Parenthood and how I left. And it goes through the court case. And people say it's a very easy read, so I encourage people to get it.
Great. Yeah, definitely check that out. That's called Unplanned by Abby Johnson. And you have another book coming out in the spring, I believe, right?
I do. I have a book that's going to be published by Ignatius Press.
Okay.
It's called The Walls Are Talking, and it is a compilation series. It's a book that has clinic workers, chapters of stories from former clinic workers. Most of them are mine, but we've also pulled in some other workers from my current ministry, and they're sharing what's really going on inside of these abortion clinic walls. And so it's going to be a little tougher to read, but I think it's important that as Catholics and as pro-lifers that we know what's going on inside of the industry so that we can really speak to factual information.
Absolutely. That sounds very powerful. Definitely check that out. What's the title again going to be of that?
The Walls Are Talking.
The Walls Are Talking. So definitely check that out. When we left off at the break, Abby Johnson was talking as she's had this big change in her life, and now she and her husband were looking for a new church because they found themselves unwelcome at their previous church. And your husband's comment was absolutely not the
Absolutely
Catholic Church.
Not. Yeah, all of our new friends were Catholic, and I remember him saying, "Now look, they're all going to try to convert us, but it's not going to happen. We're not becoming Catholic." I said, "Okay, whatever." So anyway, we did want to go somewhere a liturgical type of service. That was something that we were very comfortable with and enjoyed. And so we were trying to we went to a couple of different liturgical type of churches and services, and we just didn't find that was really where we connected. And so one Sunday we were supposed to go to this church, but we ended up getting there too late. And I said, well, there's Mass at a Catholic church down the road. And he's like, okay, we can go, but just so you know. And I'm like, I know, we're not becoming Catholic. So we go to church, and we're sitting there, and it just, I mean, I can't really even explain it. It just felt like that was home. It felt so comfortable for me. But I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to really have to battle this out with my husband. And he leans over to me and he says, this is really similar to the Episcopalian church. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, the service is, but the values aren't. Yeah. So then the next week, we ended up going back to the church that we were supposed to go the previous week, but we were too late. And we left, and we didn't really feel connected there either. And so I was feeling very frustrated by this point because I knew we needed to have a church home. I knew we needed to be involved with the church family, but I just didn't know where that was going to be. And my husband says, I thought we were going to look into the Catholic Church. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You've been just, no Catholic Church. And he said, oh, I told you last week. And I said, no, you told me that it was similar to the Episcopal Church. And he said, oh, that's what I meant. So we started going to Mass, and I started reading books. I think the first Catholic book I read was Catholicism versus Fundamentalism, which is a little heavy, but I really enjoyed it. And gosh, it just broke down so many of those myths that I had built up in my head. And our dear friend Sean Carney, who's with 40 Days for Life, who was really at the center of my conversion out of the abortion industry. Sure. He said, look, what if you guys went to RCIA? There's no pressure. Yeah. You don't have to become Catholic, but just so that you could learn about the church and ask questions. And we said, okay, fine. So he set it up with the RCIA director at St. Mary's Parish in College Station, and we did it privately. We felt like the RCIA director felt like we needed to do it privately because I didn't have a whole lot of anonymity back home. And, he was fearful that it would turn into this, let's ask Abby every question we can about Planned Parenthood session. And so we did it privately, and it was just beautiful. And we learned so much, and really just felt like this was the right place for us to be. And looking back, I mean, I can see God working on me the whole time.
Absolutely.
Even God working on me to one day come into the Catholic Church, but I didn't see it at the time. And so after a long process, because nothing is speedy in the Catholic Church, so after a long process and filling out lots of papers, we did become Catholic, and both my husband and I came into the church in Easter of 2011.
Well, welcome home.
Thank you.
So you worked through a number of issues, and you can talk about more of those if you'd like. But what I was going to ask you about, how does your perception of what church means change in this process? Beforehand, did the truth and the membership in a specific right church mean something to you, or was it just, again, you talked a little bit earlier about how you found a church that kind of matched your values? How did your different understanding of what the church really is and why you would go to one church versus the other, how did that maybe change during this process?
Well, I think, before we had gone to churches because they made us feel good.
Sure.
Right? We went, we like that service. We like the music there. That made us feel really good when we walked out of the building. And then we left it there. So then we didn't live out our faith every day. And then we'd go back on Sunday to get our feel good, warm and fuzzy, hour long service. And then we would leave again and go back, into our worldly life. And so that was really something that changed for us. When we became Catholic, it was kind of like, okay, this is a little different. This isn't like a, praise and worship, let's feel all warm and fuzzy. This is real, and it taught us, the Catholic Church really has helped teach us how to live out our faith every day. And that's something that we really just didn't have before.
Sure. How did it affect in some sense, your conversion of heart in regards to pro-life issues was very intuitive. It was experiential. How did maybe discovering the Catholic Church, how did that maybe affect or supplement that understanding?
Well, it did greatly, because for the first time I actually heard a priest, someone from the clergy, speaking about abortion, during a homily and talking about forgiveness, and I saw our priests out there praying on the sidewalk. I saw that I saw not just saying we're pro-life, but being pro-life, and acting on that. And that was the first time I'd really seen that inside of a church. Right. And so that was huge for me, living out what we believe. And then also, of course, when I first decided, I think we'd like to become Catholic, I was still very contraception minded. And I remember saying, I'm never going to be against contraception. It's never going to happen.
Right.
And you think I would have learned by now not to ever say that. But that's never going to happen. That's ridiculous. These Catholics, they don't believe in contraception. They don't believe in abortion. That just doesn't make sense. And so I just thought, well, I'll just be a contracepting Catholic, and I had a very radical conversion on the issue of contraception also. And now I started looking into natural family planning, and my husband and I are Creighton users, and you wouldn't know it because we keep getting pregnant, but they're planned. And, and so we just, really, I mean, it just, our whole lives changed in so many ways. And my husband said, he was talking to someone the other day, and he said, if we had not become Catholic, if Abby had not left Planned Parenthood and we had not become Catholic, I think we would be divorced by now. Wow. And I think he's right, because the church completely changed our marriage. Right. And it changed me as a person, and it solidified why I'm doing what I am doing. Yeah. And so much about being Catholic is about sacrifice, and that's really what this movement is about. The pro-life movement is really 100% about sacrifice. Right. And so I think he was right. That was shocking to hear him say that, but I think that's probably accurate.
Sure. My name is John Mark Grodi, and I work with the Coming Home Network, and I'm standing in for my father Marcus this evening as he's away with a family health situation, but he'll be back next week. And we're talking with Abby Johnson. And we have a number of questions in the queue, and so the last thing I just wanted to ask you before we got into those questions was just, so what's been happening since then? Talk a bit more about your work and how your life has your faith life and your pro-life work has continued within the Catholic Church.
So I run an apostolate. I run a ministry called And Then There Were None, and our website is abortionworker.com. And we basically try to, as much as we can, proactively reach into these clinics and pull workers out. Right. Workers that feel trapped, workers that are struggling, workers that have had conversions but don't know how to leave. Some people say, Abby, why can't they just leave? I mean, that just seems silly. You don't like your job, you leave. But it's not that easy. Right. Having the abortion industry on your resume is a big black mark. And people say, well, but everybody seems so supportive of Planned Parenthood. Well, they may be supportive on the outside, but to hire someone that's been inside of a Planned Parenthood clinic is risky. Yeah. For medical offices, they know that Planned Parenthood is involved in Medicaid fraud and illegal abuses of women, and so they don't want to have anything to do with that if someone leaves. And also the workers feel very threatened because they're told by their supervisors, you're never going to get another job. We're going to give you a poor reference. We're going to do everything we can to basically keep you trapped here. And I saw that firsthand with my supervisor. So we started this ministry, and so far we've had 91 workers come to us since June of 2012. And there was nothing else nothing else like this out there. Yeah. And so I felt like this was a piece of the puzzle, a piece of the pro-life puzzle, if you will, that was missing. And we provide financial help while they're transitioning out of the abortion industry into another job. We do help them with job training and help them with job placement. We provide free legal help. We are partnered with Alliance Defending Freedom. We have more than 3,000 allied attorneys who have stepped forward and said, yes, I'm willing to help these workers with any legal issues, and there are many. We help them emotionally. We provide healing retreats specifically for abortion clinic workers to help them on a path of restoration and healing and forgiveness. Right. And then we also provide spiritual support. So we do like to get them in contact with spiritual directors in their area, or priests, or clergy, or whoever they feel comfortable with. I can tell you that the majority of workers that have come to us have been practicing Catholics. Wow. And not Catholic. I was baptized a Catholic as an infant, and now I don't ever go to Mass. These are women and men who are actively in the Catholic Church. They're receiving Eucharist, they're going to Mass, and they're working in the abortion industry. And that's why one of my goals is to really empower and encourage our clergy to speak the truth about abortion from the pulpit in their homilies, because there are people in their congregations that are, one, working in the abortion industry, or considering having an abortion, they're in a crisis pregnancy, or they have already had an abortion and they are in need of forgiveness and healing. So that's really what our ministry is about.
That's wonderful. As you said, we have a lot of work to do. It's interesting. I wanted to insert a point right there that there's some interesting parallels between your work and our work in the Coming Home Network, in the sense that one thing that we've recognized, one of our focuses is to work with Protestant, non-Catholic ministers who are thinking of becoming Catholic. And a similar aspect of that situation is that we're recognizing that in certain people's lives and situations they're in, maybe with the best intentions, maybe they love truth, but maybe they've been confused, or somehow something's not been right. And when there's a moment of grace, a moment for God to work, we need to make sure that we're there to help them make that moment of grace. Because a lot of times there's lots of financial or relational impediments to making a big step that they need to take. And there was another parallel too, but I can't remember what it was. So worry about that. So that's what was the website again?
Abortionworker.com.
Okay, and then your other website
is my own personal website is abbyjohnson.org.
Okay, and so does that bring you up to speed on your pro-life work? Anything else going on?
Yeah, no, I do some legislative work, both at the state level and federal level, and I go around sharing my story and speaking as much as possible, and that's pretty much it. I mean, my vocation is to be a mom and to be a wife, and this is part of what I'm doing. This is going and strengthening our pro-life culture and strengthening it with our children as well. I think is equally as important.
That's wonderful. I remember what I was going to say earlier, which is that as you give us insight into this work that we have to do, in the sense that we have a lot of Catholics who don't realize what they're doing. They may be pro-choice. They may be even involved in Planned Parenthood or something like that. And one of the best ways to shake people out of that is to hear conversion stories. And so some of the work that you're doing in sharing these stories of people who have seen, who through grace, through a situation, have been allowed to see the contradiction. Right. The seriousness, the gravity of the situation. And
I think that is important. I mean, we know that statistics show that 72% of women who have abortions actually are churched women. They're coming from our churches. And I think that it's important that that they hear stories from women who have gone through abortion, who can say, look, it took a toll on me, on me emotionally, on my spiritual life. I think they need to hear that, and I think they need to hear it regularly. And I was talking to at a conference, a Catholic conference, this priest came up to me afterwards, and he says, Abby, how much do we really need to talk about abortion in the church? And I said, well, I don't know, Father, but I can tell you that hundreds of times I watched as women laid on the abortion table with a blood pressure cuff on this arm and a rosary in this hand. And I know people that go out and sidewalk counsel, they've seen people driving in with rosaries hanging on their cars, or a sticker of Our Lady of Guadalupe on the back of their car. I mean, it's so prevalent inside of the church, and that's something we're going to have to work as the laity inside of our churches to really get the message out there, and to share our own conversion stories, and to share our own experiences with abortion.
Absolutely. Well, we have a question from Paul from Newark, and he asks, could Abby describe a little about her experience with the sacrament of reconciliation? What was it like to hear the words of absolution? Did it give her a sense of peace?
I was very nervous to go. I guess that's normal, but I was really nervous to go to confession the first time. First of all, I didn't really know what I was doing. Right? I'd never done it before. And so I'm like, I'm not, I haven't memorized contrition. All these different things are in my mind. I'm thinking, I'm going to really shock this priest. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm just, and a friend of mine was like, they've heard it all. They kept telling me, they've heard, he's not going to be shocked, But man, the first time I went, I mean, I cried through the whole thing. I went in going, I'm not going to cry. And as soon as I sat down, I just started crying. Yeah. I think leaving, I literally felt lighter. I mean, I literally felt like this burden, all of these burdens had been lifted off of me. And I was just I've never felt peace like that before. And so I try to go as often as I can.
Yeah, likewise, yeah. We have another question. Blaze from Norfolk, Virginia. How can the Virgin Mary be an inspiration for mothers who are contemplating having an abortion, or for those women who have had abortions? Do you think that asking for Mary's prayers can be a first step to becoming more open to life?
I think so. And, I can tell you that, growing up in the Protestant church, I always had a fascination with Mary, and always wondered why we were not talking about her. I mean, she's undoubtedly the most important woman ever in history, and yet there was this silence about her. We had Bible studies on Esther and Ruth, and but nothing on Mary. It was like, and you'd ask a question about Mary, and it was like, shh, we don't talk about her except at Christmas, right? And so that was confusing for me, and something that I wanted to really explore. And so when we became Catholic, that was permission, right, for me to say, I'm going to really dive in to learning about the Blessed Mother, and learning about how she intercedes for us and can help us. And I found a lot of peace just trying to find forgiveness for myself. It's easy to know that God's forgiven me, right? But to find forgiveness for myself, leaning on her intercession and her strength, and just her care as a mother, was very comforting for me. And I think it can be for many women.
Yeah, that's a really important point, that sometimes we go through some of the more intellectual parts of conversion. But Mary, I think, can be a real help. As Catholics, we believe in this communion of saints, that we can call upon the saints to pray for us. We're not worshiping them. We're praying. We're asking them to pray for us and to intercede for us. And I think, particularly Mary, as a mother, as someone who, during Jesus' incarnational earthly life, had such an intimate closeness to him, and has that closeness now with him. I think she can help pray that we experience the grace to have not just the intellectual change, but the heart change, that our emotions can be healed, our affectivity can be healed. And so, she's a very important intercessor on that point. We have another question. Laura from Rhode Island asks, in Abby's opinion, what are some recent noteworthy pro-life developments that help show that society might be becoming more open to recognizing the pain abortion causes?
I think that the legislation that we've seen in multiple states, and not to brag, but in my state of Texas,
Sure.
I think that it's really been a tool to educate the masses, and and not just people that are abortion supporting, but also people that are apathetic, because most people believe that abortion takes place in a clean, sterile medical environment, but that is very far from the truth most of the time, and women are being harmed, and I think that all of this legislation that's happening is really showing what's actually taking place inside of the abortion clinics. I think people are really rising up and saying, wait a minute, this isn't safe. It may be legal, but it's not safe, and it's certainly not rare. Yeah. I think that we need to relook at this. And so I think that's important. And I think women who have had abortions and those that are coming forward and courageously sharing their stories, that is really opening the eyes of our public as well.
Absolutely. Another question, Father Don from Pennsylvania. What can Catholic priests do to better minister to women in their parishes who have had abortions? With the Church's firm teaching of abortion, I imagine many women may feel vulnerable coming forward to get help after their abortions.
So I always encourage priests to during reconciliation, if a woman says that she's had an abortion and she's confessing that they have some sort of literature in the confessional that they can give women if they confess having had an abortion or being involved in abortion. And for men too, because there are many men that are really suffering and really struggling because they took someone to the abortion clinic. And so I always encourage priests to have some information, Rachel's Vineyard or Project Rachel or pregnancy centers in their area that may offer post-abortive healing ministries, to have that available to women and men, because I think that's very important, that you can actually hand them something tangible and say, this is another way that you can receive help. And I also, there are some very simple things that churches can implement. I don't know about you, but the bulletin at my church is about 16 pages long. And we have, ads in there for everything. I'm the Catholic exterminator. I'm the Catholic chiropractor, And I said, we need to have an ad in there every Sunday for crisis pregnancy centers in the area, post-abortive healing ministries, resources for women, because that's not weird, right? You're not having to go back to a table and look at something. Everybody's taking a bulletin, so you stick it in your purse and you can call later. And so it's a little more anonymous. And I always encourage Catholic churches every day during daily Mass and during our Sunday Mass, there needs to be, in the prayers of the faithful, there needs to be some sort of mention about the sanctity of human life and healing for those that have been affected by abortion. Those are very simple things that can be done, but I find that they're very effective whenever churches actually put them into practice.
Yeah, absolutely. One last question. Corey from Texas asks, a lot of people say that they are pro-life, but then don't do much to actively witness to the pro-life cause. Should pro-life individuals focus on prayer for the conversion of people's hearts, or should they be visibly involved in spreading the message of life? What are some good ways to be involved?
So I think you have to do both. And I think if you have a very serious prayer life, then you will be called to action. Sure. You will be moved to action. And if you're not moved to action, then I would question your prayer life, because I think that we're all going to be challenged to be pushed beyond our comfort zone and to do things maybe that we've never done before. There's three basic tenets of involvement in the pro-life movement, and certainly some in between. But one is being involved at the legislative level, whether that's with the Right to Life group or some other legislative group in your area, lobbying at the Capitol. Helping to promote bills, pro-life bills, lobbying your senators and reps. Sure. So there's that piece of it. There's also the pregnancy center movement, where people can get involved. Maybe you feel called to counsel women who are abortion vulnerable, or maybe who have already had abortions. Right. Maybe you just want to work in the mommy boutique where they give out diapers and things like that. But they're always in need of volunteers. And then also, finally, would be, true activism. So going out to the sidewalks where these abortions are taking place and being there as the last hope for these women to choose life, and to literally bring Christ out there to the sidewalks, to be a witness. And you can do that through 40 Days for Life. There's other groups out there that go out there. You don't have to be a person that is a sidewalk counselor. You don't have to talk to women going in, but just your prayer presence is so important. The last Planned Parenthood conference I went to, they gave a statistic that was astounding, and I try to share it everywhere I can. When people are outside praying in front of the abortion clinics, the no-show rate for appointments, so women that have abortions scheduled but don't show up for their appointment, goes up to 75%. Wow. And so I encourage, the laity to get out there and pray. I especially encourage religious sisters and clergy, priests to go out there. We had a sister that was out there frequently at our clinic, and I can't even remember how many times we got a phone call that said, "When is the nun going to leave? Because I'm not coming until she leaves." And we are, and particularly the clergy, we are the outward sign of their inward conscience. And so we need to be out there to spread that love in a compassionate way and in a merciful way. And that does save lives.
Absolutely. Well, and for those who are doing those things, those who do tirelessly, like Abby, work to promote the sanctity of life, thank you. And we'll keep you in our prayers. We've been speaking with Abby Johnson, former Baptist and Episcopalian who has just shared a wonderful story with us of coming to see the sanctity of life, and she's doing great work. Her websites are www.abbyjohnson.org, that's her personal site, as well as abortionworker.com. And we've got about, maybe in 30 seconds, if there's somebody listening who's involved in the industry, what's one thing that you would say to them?
I would say to them that this is not what you grew up wanting to do, that you did not grow up wanting to work in an abortion clinic, and that there is great potential for you in life-affirming work, and we want to help you figure out what that is. And there's 91 people that want to surround you with prayer and love and want to help you as you leave, and they should go to our website, abortionworker.com, and find out more about us and how we can help.
Absolutely. Make sure you check that out and share it with others who may need it too. We have a lot of work to do, as Abby's pointed out, so let's keep this issue in our prayers. Let's be involved in the ways that we can. And let's keep sharing stories of how God's changed us and led us to come to see the truth. As I said before, my name is John Mark Grodi. I'm the communications coordinator with the Coming Home Network. I filled in for Marcus this evening because he's away on a family health issue, but he'll be back next week. We had a great interview, and we look forward to talking with you again next week on the journey home. Take care.